Welcome to episode 14 of Published. My name is Tanya Hall, and today I'm speaking with Margaret Terwey, a senior buyer from BooksaMillion.
Welcome to Published, a podcast by Greenleaf Book Group, where we'll discuss the ins and outs of the publishing industry, from writing a book and finding the right publisher to gearing up for a book launch. And now, here's your host, Greenleaf Book Group CEO, Tanya Hall.
Welcome back to Published. Today we are very lucky to be able to speak with Margaret Terwey, a senior buyer from the bookstore BooksaMillion. So one of the things that sets us apart at Greenleaf Book Group, amongst hybrid publishers especially, is the focus we have on bookstore sales and distribution. So that's really, as I like to say, the hub of the wheel here. And it is, of course, really the roots of our business. We started as a distributor, so we're particularly strong in distribution, and that's quite different from some other publishers who don't actively pitch the books they represent to bookstores. They sort of set them up in databases, and then the ordering happens at will if someone demands it, but there's no one championing the books into bookstores, which is quite different than how we work here at Greenleaf, where we do have that distribution team out there, boots on the ground, trying to get things into the store. So that's always been a primary focus for us, but it's a bit of a confusing world. There's a lot of logistics and processes and timelines and rules that are often surprising to authors. So today we're hoping to pull back the curtain a bit for all of you listeners on what it takes to actually see your book in bookstores on shelves. So we'll talk a little bit about everything from how publishers pitch to bookstores to what buyers like Margaret are looking for when they make that ultimate decision on whether or not you get your shelf space. So without further ado, let's get into our interview with Margaret. So Margaret, welcome to Published.
Thank you so much, Tanya. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. This is an area that my authors and some of my employees sort of refer to as the black voodoo magic part of book sales, because distribution can be super complicated from the outside, I think. And, I personally am blessed that that's my background in this company. So I've sat across from buyers, including those at BooksaMillion, and know a little bit more about how this works, but I know
I get a lot of questions from authors and publishers.
Yeah, and probably a lot of, why do you guys do this? So let's go straight into the most common one, because when I start talking to people about the timeline required to publish a book, and I tell them basically about the kind of lead time we need to pitch it properly to retail, they about have a heart attack.
Right. So,
and can you speak to that a little bit and why that is set up the way it is?
Sure. So I have 3 seasons of buying in my timeline: summer, fall, winter, spring. Winter, spring is combined into one buying season. And our summer buys, summer is for early February, summer is for books going on sale from May through August, but my buying is done in January and February for that season. And then fall is our biggest season. And those books go on sale from September through January, but I buy beginning in April, and I complete those buys by early June. And then winter, spring includes books going on sale from February through May, and I buy for that season in August and September. So it might seem like we're buying really far in advance for each season, but that 4 to 6 months is really required to create a merchandising and marketing plan for our stores that will hit on trends and generate sales that are competitive with the previous year.
Okay, could you dig into that a little bit more in terms of what's happening on your end in that 4 to 6 month window? Because I think in the author's mind, you guys just are being bullies and want to hear a pitch early, then you sit back and twiddle your thumbs.
And then we sit back and we do nothing. No, we're all getting together, and by all of us, I mean the merchandising department, which includes the buyers and the planners who put the books in the stores, our operations department who communicates with the stores, and our marketing department who not only does social media and print advertising, but they do the sign packages for the stores. They're doing a lot of interaction with the publishers, and booksamillion.com, who's doing a lot of digital marketing. We all get together several times during that 4 to 6 months to come up with the merchandising and the marketing plan, and to figure out what trends do we want to focus on, how are we going to be competitive with the previous year. When you had a Harry Potter or a 50 Shades the previous year, or a hot trend like coloring books, and there's not a Harry Potter or a 50 Shades or a hot trend, we have to brainstorm to create that next big book or that next big trend.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Okay. Well, that makes more sense. I think that'll help some authors understand that it's not just archaic rules that are there from legacy processes.
It's not. It takes a lot of time to plan what's going to be happening in the stores with the books that we're buying.
Okay. Now, the way that y'all have the buying structured, how do you organize that? So who's buying what, and how do you decide? You talked a lot about trends and trying to, of course, beat the previous year, but how do you organize that so that you, I suppose, have experts in certain areas who can kind of hone in on that? Can you talk a little bit about that structure?
We're lucky to have some really long-time buyers. Our kids and teen buyer, for example, has been here for 30 years buying kids and teen. So she really is an expert. Our Faith Point buyer has been here for 20 years. I've been here for 20 years. I buy fiction, poetry, new age / body, mind, spirit, and audiobooks. So we have 10 book buyers total who cover all of the categories in our stores. And each one of those buyers is an expert on the categories assigned to them. Mm-hmm. So the publishers present books to each buyer based on how the book has been categorized by the publisher. And sometimes the buyer doesn't always agree with the categorization, and they suggest a different buyer. For example, there's often a blurred line between new age / body, mind, spirit, which is one of my categories, and personal growth, which is another buyer. So the decision lies in how and where the marketing will happen, where the customer for the topic of that book is most likely to shop in our stores. So each one of the buyers meets with each one of the publishers and sees all of their titles for a season. And then some of those titles get passed on to another buyer.
Yeah, it's actually remarkable that all of that is handled by 10 people because you all see a lot of books, which really underscores what we're constantly telling people about needing to differentiate and have a platform and all the other things people can learn about on this podcast.
Yeah, I manage about 25,000 titles in fiction, poetry, new age, and audiobooks. So just my titles is about 25,000 titles.
That's amazing. And you also made an interesting point about books that straddle genres, which is something that we're always sort of keen to keep an eye on during the developmental process. And we see it a lot in business self-help. So a book will be about, personal success, which can swing either way, but we'll try to sort of steer it in one direction or the other early so that we don't get into this no man's land when it comes time to pitch it at retail.
Right. For us, it really does become a conversation about where is our customer going to look for that book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, where is the author's audience and how are they marketing it? I think that can often have a big impact on that outcome.
Right.
Yeah. So another thing that I often hear when I'm out doing sort of speaking and education about publishing is frustration around why an author can't go in and pitch you directly. Because of course they want to give you all of their energy and enthusiasm in person. And we tell them.
And I love that energy and enthusiasm.
Yeah, we all do. But I'm sure you have some very good reasons for why that cannot happen. And can you tell our authors why it's set up the way it is?
Well, the sheer amount of books that we're buying and selling really doesn't allow us enough time in our schedule as buyers to get direct pitches from authors. We also don't typically buy directly from authors because we have vendor contracts in place with publishers and distributors that allow our shipping, receiving, and invoicing processes to flow smoothly. So we rely on the publishers and the distributors to pitch the books for the authors. That being said, if an author has a local BooksaMillion store, they're welcome to pitch their book there, and if interested, the store will provide direction on submitting the book to one of the buyers for review. So it's important to know that self-published books, though, are a tougher sell because they're often a short discount and non-returnable.
Okay. Can you explain for folks who aren't familiar with those terms what you mean by a short discount? I think not returnable is pretty self-explanatory, but maybe you can help them understand what to avoid.
Yeah, our standard discount is 48 to 55%. Oftentimes, a short discount book will be well below that. So if I'm being pitched a book that only that has less than a 48% discount, essentially that's a short discount for me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And yeah, that is typically, I guess, found in books that are set up POD. Is that what you're speaking to, the self-published titles? Yeah. Yeah. And in those cases, they can come to Greenleaf Book Group and perhaps we can serve as their distributor.
Exactly. And oftentimes when we have a self-published author and it's a book that we're interested in, but we really can't do it with those terms, we'll recommend that author to some publishers that accept unagented manuscripts, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay. So you talked about all of these pitches and you handling 25,000 titles. So obviously that's a ton of volume, and I'm sure you get to a point where it's like everybody starts to sound like the teacher on the Peanuts. But when you're listening to these pitches, what makes your ears perk up? What makes you sit up a little straighter in your chair and think, wow, this might be a breakout title or one that we want to put some support behind?
That is a really good question. If a publisher tells me that Reese Witherspoon already read this and loved it, that is near the top of my list as what makes my ears perk up right now, because her book club is gaining a following like Oprah's book club. Wow. And when she picks something up for a TV or movie project, it's likely to happen. But aside from that, Won at Auction is another big one. Okay. Won, W-O-N. Mm-hmm. Because if there was already a bidding war between publishers for a book, then I want that book too. And then so many books now are driven by social media. So I want to know what the author's social media presence is. How many followers do they have? How active are they with their posts? Will they link to Books-A-Million? That's all important to my buying decision.
That's very interesting, because often when we tell authors that, they turn around and say, well, what are they looking for? Give us some quantifiable goal. So is it different from book to book, or is there a certain level that, let's say on Twitter or Instagram, that you look at and you're like, okay, that is a legit author with a platform?
It really varies book to book and category by category. Several 100,000 is a good number, and that seems like a really large number, but really it's not when you look at how many Twitter followers some people have. We look at numbers a little bit lower than that. Sometimes we look at numbers that are starting to climb also. Right now, for me, social media-driven poets have been really successful. So we're looking at a lot of those, any type of social media presence. When I start to see a social media driven poet going viral, I'll follow that poet and look at those books harder.
That's very interesting. We'll have to keep our eyes peeled for social media poets. It's not on my radar. Okay, so the proverbial $10 million question, do you judge a book by its cover?
I absolutely do judge a book by its cover. I think we all do. We can't help it. We're visual creatures.
Absolutely.
If the cover immediately draws my attention and creates a suggestion of a story that I need to learn more about, I'm more likely to want to buy enough to allow that cover to be seen in our stores. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to just buy the 1 to 2 copies to spine it. In category, I want everybody to see that fantastic cover that's going to make them pick it up. With fiction, especially, I think, though, it's also about the story and the writing. So the cover will spark my interest, but it's that original story and the writing that's going to draw me into the story and keep me interested. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything, a person who's maybe managing their own cover design, are there any big no-nos for you that you look at and say, I wish you hadn't done that to your cover?
Oh my gosh, there's just the ones that look amateurish, and I don't know really how to describe that. Other than it looks amateurish, or the ones that look like a book that may have been published decades ago, that type of cover.
I know what you mean. It's kind of hard to just put a list of terms around it, but you know it when you see it.
You know it when you see it, exactly.
Yeah. It's usually a combination of bad fonts, bad images, I would say drop shadows.
Yes.
On a title.
Sometimes it comes down to something as simple as the wrong quote on the book.
Oh, that's interesting.
It might be an author who's in a certain genre, and the quote that they put on the cover of the book isn't an author who's in that genre, so it doesn't really make sense. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes the book may need a quote on the cover, and there may be some really great blurbs that have been submitted for the book, and those are on the back of the book or inside the book, and it just needs one of those really great blurbs added to the cover.
So when you see an issue like that, given that you've got this lead time, do you convey that to the publisher and give them a chance to fix it and resubmit it to you, or do you just sort of write that off as, oh, darn it, had they only done this one thing?
Oh, no, we absolutely talk about it during the buying sessions. I give all of my opinions, and the sales reps are really good about bringing those back to the publisher. And oftentimes the changes get made. Sometimes sometimes changes don't always get made, and we have to live with the cover that we hated. But yeah, and I know there's been covers that I've hated that have ended up selling really well. So I don't claim to always be right about that.
Yeah, I think the more any of us work in this business, the more that becomes true.
Exactly.
I have those examples as well. So, of course, one of the other things that we're always careful to present when we do our buying pitches in the retail environment is to really play up the author's publicity efforts, especially because a lot of our authors are what we call debut authors, not first-time authors. So we really want to show that there's support behind the book to drive demand because they're not a known quantity for you. So can you speak a little bit to the importance of publicity efforts when you're making a decision about buying a book, and especially when it's often hard for them to nail those down 6 months in advance of pub date?
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, social media plays an extensive role in building a following and directing those readers to the bookstore. TV and radio interviews also create interest, and readers still love to meet the authors and get a book personalized. So knowing that there's going to be a book tour that includes my stores is a compelling selling point.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point. Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people talk about bookstore signings being dead. So I know it's sort of a different subject area, but I think there's probably a smart way to do a signing to where you get attendance that makes it worthwhile for the store and the author.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We've had some really successful events, especially with debut authors. As long as, the debut author is promoting it on social media, we're promoting it on social media and driving those readers into the store for the event.
Mm-hmm. So social media has become a game changer, it sounds like, as far as...
It really is.
Yeah, impact to your buying decision is pretty strong.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you talked a bit about timeline earlier, and I'm sorry, I think you ran through your schedule on when you hear the pitch, when you actually commit to a quantity, and when you place the order. But could you go through that one more time for us?
Sure. So summer, fall, and winter, spring are my 3 buying seasons, winter, spring being combined into one buying season. The summer buys are done in January and early February, and those are the books going on sale from May through August. And then fall is our biggest season. So those books are on sale from September through January during the holiday season. And we do that buy in April, and we're completed by early June. That buy takes us a little bit longer because the publishers have so many more titles for that season. So we start buying at the beginning of April, and then we're completed in early June for that buy. Winter, spring includes books on sale from February through May, and we do that buy in August and September. So it is 4 to 6 months prior to the on sale date for each one of those buys. And that's when I make my decision on what quantity I'll bring in and what the merchandising and marketing plan will be for each book. When I'm meeting with the publishers for that buy session, I make that initial decision right then, and I tell them, we talk through how we're going to promote the book, what type of marketing they're doing for the book, and how we should tie in to the publisher marketing. We also make the decision on where the book will be placed in the stores, whether it's a big enough buy for a front of store feature cart, or if it's going to be a stack on the table. If we think it's going to become a bestseller, we address that at that point and buy enough to be able to place it on a feature in the store and also do a bestseller pocket. So there's a lot of thought process that goes into each one of the titles, but I can always change my mind. Those are my initial decisions. That's how the initial buy goes in. But throughout that 4 to 6 months where we're doing the planning and there's more going on, I'm reading the galleys that I've been given, I might make changes to a particular book buy. I might make changes to a particular book buy based on my reading the book and what I think about the book. The buy could either be cut, or I could increase the buy because I really loved the book, or based on reviews that are coming in, or based on additional publisher marketing that's coming in. Also during the buy session, we talked a little bit about covers and do I judge a book by the cover, and do we talk about that during the buy session? And we absolutely do. So sometimes a format change or a change in the cover of the book can influence my buy. If they come back to me with something that I like better, I'm I'm willing to increase the buy at that point.
Okay. You said a couple interesting things in there that I'm hoping you can expand on. You said
Sure.
One was if you think it's going to become a bestseller. And I think every person listening to this podcast is going, how will she know? Because
Well, we have some history with some authors.
Exactly.
So we know that they always hit our bestseller list. So that's one way to determine that it's going to be a bestseller and know that that buy is going to be there. There are other books that we just decide during the buy session, we're going to make this a bestseller. And I'm sure you've got those on your list, your make books. Mm-hmm. And so we decide that we're going to make that book. And in order to make that book, we have to buy enough to put it front of store. And we know that just by putting it out there, that power of suggestion is going to make it a bestseller. We're going to put full marketing behind it. We're going to do social media. We're going to put it in our print advertising. We're going to tell our customers that this is the book they have to read. And hopefully put that book on our bestseller list.
Yeah. Well, with great power comes great responsibility, as Spider-Man said.
Exactly. Another thing that we talk about during the buy session is sometimes there's a book that I think would be ideal for a specific holiday promotion, like Halloween, New Year, New You, Mother's Day, beach reads, Father's Day, that kind of thing. But the book is scheduled too late for that holiday promotion. So my sales rep also takes those kind of comments back to the publisher. And if the publisher agrees with me, I'll adjust my buy to be able to promote that book during that holiday season.
Well, that's great. So that it sounds like you have a very collaborative approach with the publishers in terms of how you're working together to hopefully place these books in store.
We do.
And I was also interested in the comment you made about reading the galleys. So how many books a week do you read? And what percentage of, because you must get tons and tons of galleys. So what percentage of them are you able to actually read?
I really only read about 2 books a week.
That's a lot.
I do audiobooks as well, and I love the publishers that do the advanced listening copies because I have a long commute. But I read a lot of debut fiction because I'm always looking for that book that we can make. And then I consider I always have 2 books that I'm reading because I read the debut fiction I'm trying to make, and then I read authors that I know that I love. And so those are the 2 books that I'm always reading each week, but I don't get through nearly as many books as I would like to. And I'm kind of ashamed to say that since becoming a book buyer, I don't read nearly as much as I used to.
I'm sure. Pleasure became work.
It did. But there are a lot of people in my office who are fiction readers and a lot of people who are specific genre fiction readers. So I have my romance readers and my sci-fi and fantasy readers and my mystery readers. And so I'm always passing books along to other people in the office and to friends and family, and people out in the stores get review copies, and our district managers get review copies. So I get a lot of input from everybody else in the office, everybody that I work with, everybody that I interact with. And that's really great. It helps me a lot.
I'm sure it sounds like it. So of all these pitches that you hear, we talked about cover design and our, despite being able to put a clear picture for somebody on what makes a bad cover, we know it when we see it. But what are the other mistakes that I guess most commonly trip up a pitch? I would think that maybe price point would be one of them.
Price point. It's interesting because having been a buyer for 20 years, I can't say that there are absolute deal breakers because there have been exceptions to everything I can think of. I'll almost always pass on the short discounts that we talked about and non-returnable books. And price is definitely a factor, as is format, and sales history contributes to my decision. But where there's potential in a book, there's always an exception to those deal breakers. So it's tough to say that anything is an absolute deal breaker. You know, when Harper Lee came out with the signed copies of Go Set a Watchman, I thought there's no way we're going to sell a $1,500 book in our stores, but we did.
That's awesome. I love to hear that because that really reinforces that it's worth trying it whenever somebody's a little discouraged or doubting a decision. It's worth
Yes.
a go. And it sounds like, again, you all will help them retool if necessary, if it's off the mark.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, anything else that you would like to share with our listeners about the book buying process or how they can sort of maximize their chances of getting strong bookstore distribution?
We talked a lot about social media, so I just have one more thing to say about social media. One of the biggest mistakes that I see authors make in social media is that they only link to Amazon. And I'm not saying don't link to Amazon, but if you want to see your books in a brick-and-mortar bookstore, please also direct the reader to a brick-and-mortar bookstore.
That's an excellent point. Yes. Yes. All right. Be fair in your affiliate links.
Yes, please.
And it's good to note that you guys are looking for that.
I look at that all the time. I follow a lot of authors, a lot of book websites on Facebook and on Twitter, and whenever I see that, I always react to it.
I'm sure. I don't blame you. Okay, great. Well, Margaret, thank you so much for your time today. That was really interesting. We learned a lot from what you've told us about the book buying process, and I'm sure that it will help some people make some better decisions and some stronger pitches for you down the road.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tanya.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening today. We hope you learned a lot about bookstore sales. And for more information and resources, go to greenleafbookgroup.com/episode 14. And if you like listening along, be sure to rate us on iTunes.
Thanks for listening to Published. To learn more, please visit greenleafbookgroup.com. And remember to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes.